Good morning. The Committee of the Whole is called to order. Unfortunately, due to no quorum, we'll stay on recess. I'd like to thank my colleagues that have joined me this morning, Senator Guåhan, Senator Tyree, and Senator Parrish. With that, we will stay on recess until we reach a quorum. Thank you. Committee House call back to order. Folks, we're at the tail end of our budget. We will now move to the amendment of Senator Paris in reference to manpower development funding. Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues. So I'd like to proffer this amendment to add a new section, Manpower Development Fund Continuing Appropriation. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, the allotted but unexpended balance and any over collections of the Manpower Development Fund revenue appropriated to the Guam Department of Labor and the Guam Community College for fiscal year 2022, 2023, and 2024 shall not lapse and shall continue to be available until fully expended. So this amendment was requested by the director because I guess the language that currently exists in this bill and previous bills was not deemed sufficient to have access to any over collections. So the issue is that Manpower Development Fund, the money comes towards the end of the budget year. And so even though it says continuing appropriations, oftentimes it falls into the new fiscal year. And so they're unable to actually use the funds because it all comes in at one time. And at that time, they've been told by GSA that they are no longer accepting purchase orders because they have to close out the year. And so they have money. There's money in there that they haven't been able to use. So my estimate is about $1.5 million. It could be more, but that's my conservative estimate, which they can use for their agency. So as you know, that part of the agency overlooks the compliance of construction, how construction companies are treating their workers. And so they've actually issued citations. That would definitely help them boost their capacity to ensure safe working environments for labor, especially in these high-risk sites, potentially high-risk sites. And so it's just really being able to access this. And this would also support Guam Community College because there's a 30-70 split, right? So that money goes to labor workforce development, which is definitely what we need in our economy, more diversification to boost the capacity of workers, up-level their expertise. And this is something that I ask my colleagues for their support. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone like to speak to that, Madam Vice Speaker?
Mananasitus, Mr. Chair, I promise I'll make it fast. I just want to say I stand and rise in support of this amendment, knowing that the money, the audited fund balance for the northern and southern soil and water conservation districts will be intact. I think it's important as...
Sorry, Madam, just one moment's recess. Point of information. This is the Manpower Development Fund. Yeah, so this is the Department of Labor.
I'm sorry.
It's the Manpower Development Fund continuing appropriation. It's just to make sure that the funding that keeps coming in, they can use it all up and to expend it.
I don't have the amendment in front of me, Mr. Chair, but no, that's okay. I too want to say I stand and rise in support of that efforts. As you know, the Guam Community College has been able to work with the resources and pump out and train a lot of our community workers. And I think that this has been a very successful program, and I think the funding source should be intact. So again, in those efforts, I apologize. I think I was going ahead of myself for the northern and southern districts, but as it relates to the Manpower Development Fund, I stand in full support.
Thank you. Does anyone else like to speak on this amendment? I see no other hand. Do you need to close? No, are there any objection? No objection. There being none, motion closes. Motion passes, correction. Passes. Senator Barnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion notwithstanding the rules to make a quick amendment to my amendment that had passed with the GDOE $10 million, $500,000 for Chamorro studies. Sir, I would like to just amend the amendment and strike the two words "up to," if that's okay.
Okay, your motion first is to reconsider it.
Okay.
Then when we go there, then you can claim the notwithstanding.
Thank you, sir. Yes, so notwithstanding the rules, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the actions of the body relative to the amendment we had passed with the 10 million for GDOE.
Does anyone have any objection to that motion? There being none, now we'll go to that amendment.
Yes, okay, and so I'd like to amend the amendment,
Notwithstanding.
notwithstanding the rules, if the clerks could just strike out the words up to, and so it would read the sum of $10 million and not the sum of up to $10 million. So just 2 words, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Does anyone have any objection or want to comment to that? If not, are there any objection? There being none, that motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Madam Speaker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to make a motion to reconsider an amendment that was made on Chapter 5 on the Office of I Magaʹhågan, Guåhan.
There being no objection, we have an objection to that. May we have a vote? Raise your hand for vote to accept to reconsider. Motion passes. We will reconsider that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this amendment that I'm asking to reconsider is the one that I added, that's subsection 2 to Chapter 5, Office of I Magaʹhågan, Guåhan, which reads the appropriation to the Office of the Governor in subsection 1 of Section 1, subsection A, shall not be effective until the funds appropriated in Public Law 37-5 are deposited to the Guam Department of Education. Since we passed this amendment, the Guam Department of Education finally got confirmation that procurement on the mold mitigation after 2.5 months would begin. And they were promised anew by the governor the assistance of skilled labor from various agencies across the government of Guam. And during the budget process, we were able to finally pass some amendments that stopped the 50 million blank check that we had earlier given for typhoon mitigation. We put a limit which will require additional appropriation if such is needed, meaning coming back to the legislature. We put a limit on it through the amendment to use the rainy day fund instead. This will prevent further raid of the Guam Department of Education funds or any other accounts. And we have in any other agency. We've also given transfer authority to the governor to replenish the amounts used from the Guam Department of Education that are in procurement now, or return any unused portions. Even if the Guam Department of Education doesn't want it, that option is clearly available now, I think, from the amendments that we've made to the budget. We've also added an additional appropriation to the Guam Department of Education from the amendments that have been made, and so that's the reason why I'm making this amendment, or asking for this reconsideration to delete this section.
Can we get this in writing?
Thank you. Senator Fisher?
Yeah, could we get it in writing?
It's a motion to delete?
The entire section?
No,
And what is the motion she was speaking about?
she'll show it to you.
Thank you very much.
Senator Tyree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues. We know that this is probably the end of the road here because of this particular amendment now be taken out. I really don't understand why. I mean, we all know that things are not right with the schools still up to now.
Senator?
And, yeah. So,
As you make the statement, it's not being stated. I think the speaker, the author of the amendment, did state why. So,
yes, well, no, actually,
Okay.
it was stated by her comments, but we all know the situation of the schools right now. I mean, I think this was the one amendment that actually would put fire to the feet of this administration to move forward and start helping and assisting the schools. This was the one thing, the one amendment, the one that received traction, the media, parents saying, finally, an amendment that's actually going to make a difference. So what really changed here? You know, the only thing I can see that changed here is like the 50 amendments that came from individuals all of a sudden getting passed. It was like a deal that was made. Is that what our children are worth? Making a deal for something else other than really helping our school system out? Our facilities? Procurement? That's ridiculous. Procurement is still the same scenario on how to move forward. We've done everything that we could to assist to expedite procurement. Everything that possible we could have done. That hasn't changed. Now, if the superintendent can be bullied by the administration, and we have an opportunity to do something about it to assist the administration, we're going to just sit back and watch things fail? Allow this superintendent to be bullied? Bullied into thinking he cannot do it? Then what are we sitting here for? This whole entire 4 weeks was discussed about how the school needs help. It's not just the school, it's the hospital too that needs help. But everybody seems to be making their amendments for their own pet projects instead of what's really important: the safety and welfare of our people and the education of our children. That's important. They're the future. Our health. If we don't have our health, we have nothing. Those two things are important. But it seems this body has forgotten that. Well, let's hope next year, when it comes time for voting next year, the people of Guam will not forget who those individuals were. That their pet projects meant more to them than educating the people of Guam, our children of Guam, and making sure we have a hospital to go to. A safe hospital, not just for the patients, but those who work at the hospital, having to breathe in mold, people in ICU sweating, hot, uncomfortable, not being able to get well because of the condition of the hospital, our only public hospital, and this body decides to pay for pet projects. Put your money where your mouth is, people. Put your vote where it counts. This is an opportunity to put fire to the feet. Removing this amendment was just making a deal with somebody else that has no interest in our children or the welfare of our island, our home. I object.
Thank you, Senator Tarigui. Anyone else like to speak? Senator Duenas?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm quite happy that I only made one amendment in this entire budget. And that was the $20 million to be reinstated to the Department of Education. It's kind of interesting. I'm glad the amendment will at least stay intact, but it looks like we're going to remove the leverage to have that money transferred. And, you know, Mr. Chairman, the reason why I think that it's inappropriate is because we all know that this money that we authorized for the DLAN and all the recovery efforts is reimbursable. So basically what we've done is we allowed for the $20 million to go up to the DLAN to be used for emergency response, which is essentially something that should happen anyways. I mean, if we didn't have the $20 million that was appropriated to the Department of Education, I mean, would they have said, well, sorry, there's no money for mold mitigation, there's no money for debris removal, there's no money for your canopies, there's no money for your doors, there's no money for your windows? No, I think they would have, if Department of Education put in the claim, they would have said, yes, this would be a project that would be done and should follow proper documentation all the way through to where it was completely reimbursable. I guess I'm disappointed because it just seems like a shell game now. You know? And now we've gone, I'm thankful if the funding source is viable. Now we've gone and at least restored the original appropriation of 30 million. Because that was the original appropriation. We compromised during the time that we were discussing all of those bills because the pay raises were a big priority. And so we reduced it down to 20, and then we reinstated it up to, well, now we're reinstating up to 30 with this additional 20 million recognized, or 10 million recognized if the funding source comes to be. But Mr. Chairman, I mean, it's kind of interesting, and I have spoken the praises, and I still have confidence in the superintendent, but I was extremely disappointed with his reversal on this issue. Extremely disappointed. I mean, all of that effort and all of the promises really are things that should have been happening for months. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not that I'm not grateful that there was a 4-day all hands on deck. But, I just think he got buffaloed. And I'm still going to be happy with the fact that the 20 million is in their budget. And I'm going to hope that if we're really sincere about this, if we really believed that they needed that money to do what they're doing to get to the final stretch of what it's going to take over the months, all the way till hopefully the realization of all of the inspections being done as they predict in April, and perhaps getting to the end of the school year and going into the next school year, kind of back on our feet. I mean, I'm going to cheerlead for that. But the truth is we've always known that between the budget issues and the crunch that exists, and the payroll now, $9 million every payday at Department of Education, $9 million bucks. That's their payroll every 2 weeks for 26 weeks. That's a whole chunk of change. So I just hope that, there's some sincerity here to, even though we're removing this leverage, unfortunately, that there's sincerity to take that reimbursement and make that the first priority over to education, along with using current general fund revenues for other priorities that we have. But while I rise in disappointment, I'm still going to hold on to the hope, should this amendment pass, that without the leverage, the 20 million is still in the budget. And I'll spend the rest of my time over this fiscal year and into next fiscal year focusing on making sure that they realize those funds. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Anyone else like to speak? There being no, Senator Blas, followed by Senator Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, rise in disappointment at this latest attempt. We spent the better part of a month or more, actually even longer, pounding our fists, grinding our teeth, scratching our heads, stomping our feet, demanding that the priorities provided to give our schools a cleaner and safe place to educate. And this is not the first time that we did things and we were doing things in good faith. But that good faith turned to frustration. And it turned in a lot of cases, in the discussions, the tables seem to be turned against this body for its lack of action. Granted that, you know, there's a clear line as to what our responsibility is and what the executive branch's responsibility is. But we needed to put teeth, and we need to put teeth into the policies that we create so that it'll be what we as a body, be it 8 votes or more, that decides on how money should be spent, when it should be spent, how. And we have to resort now, fortunately, with this administration, we have to resort to what some can see as extreme measures so that the community can get the services that it deserves and that it needs. And that's what this amendment was for. Nobody really, if things were going right, if things were not done in a vacuum, it wouldn't have been necessary. So how do we stand here as a body that has been saying that this money should be used in this fashion, this money needs to be used in this fashion, why isn't this money used in this fashion? What are you doing? How does a body go from there to, okay, never mind? What have we been telling the people of Guam? What have we been telling our kids, the parents, the teachers? But now, we firmly believe this is going to happen for them. You know what's going to happen if it doesn't happen? We're going to get blamed again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Barnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's very rich for some of the previous speakers to talk about the direction this body is going in now, and when some of these same people went from wanting to establish a basic baseline standard for health and safety in our public schools, went from supporting that to doing a complete 180 and deciding that it's okay to send our kids into schools that are moldy and that are not safe. So please, let's not talk about the message the body is sending now, because it's a little ironic. I want to thank the author of this amendment, because at the time she proffered it, she talked about drastic measures. And I find it interesting that the day this amendment appeared in the drive that a lot of people have access to, including representatives from the Office of the Governor, But the very day that amendment in question that we're striking through appeared in the drive, we started to see the press releases come out about expedited procurement, about purchase orders that had happened. And before that, I know I don't need to remind the body of all of the things we did to try and get that help for our schools. Begging, pleading, passing legislation, going to the media. We tried everything to get the governor and lieutenant governor off their noggin and into a situation where they could help our public school system. But none of that worked until we put this amendment in the drive. And that's when things started to happen. And so I'm thankful that that amendment got things rolling. And I'm also going to commend the author for doing the work and proffering amendments, not quite 50, but some great amendments that readjusted the Typhoon Mawar recovery and response and really took the whole issue of GDOE's $20 million off the table. Amendments that put FEMA reimbursements and that ball in our court for appropriation. And so this strike through of this amendment is not quite what some of the previous speakers have painted it to be. The superintendent has indicated that that $20 million, he wants it to stay where it's at. And the expedited procurements that we're hearing about, the mold mitigation contract that's still in procurement, the purchase orders that have hit the schools for the much needed supplies, it's happening. And even though it took months, I'm not going to be the one to complain about the governor and lieutenant governor not doing anything and then complain when they are doing something. And so I think that we in this budget bill, through the amendments, have created a situation where not only have we dealt with this issue of the $20 million, but we've also dealt with FEMA reimbursements. And let's talk about pet projects. Pet project? Giving the Guam Department of Education $10 million, supporting the increased enrollment in the charter school, these are not pet projects. These are real needs of our education system that I'm glad we got these needs addressed. And again, I commend the author for doing the hard work and finally getting traction on something that this body couldn't get traction on. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak? Otherwise, Senator Nicholas? Go ahead.
Morning, Mr. Chair.
Morning.
Morning, everybody. Just a couple of days ago, my wife says, "I can't believe you're a senator." And I can't believe it either. And this is my first budget. And it's quite interesting how press releases get out at about the same time things are being discussed, which is very humorous to me. It's very funny. It's like what we try to do here is who can best malign some other, or which side could talk better than the other. But the notion of pet projects came up, and we really work hard to make sure our nonprofits and all those who've come to us ask for help. But I want to commend the speaker for doing this, for her initiative here. I think what she's doing is allowing for some breathing room, allowing for a little bit more room to work together. I think that's great. You know, I don't think advocating for the AG was a pet project. I advocated for and put an amendment on there for him when nobody else would. So that's a pet project. And he is our elected Attorney General, so we have to support him. And then Sanctuary, that's not a pet project because they take care of, it's my pet project because they take care of the homeless, runaway kids, and try to get them to stop smoking. That's a great thing. Then Customs, you know, funding them, trying to get them the necessary officers because the line is thinning up there, and we're going to lose a lot of officers in the next couple of months and years to retirement. That's another pet project of mine. Also help work with other amendments here, both sides, to try to make sure that what we're doing here is good and just. And I take a little bit of and I hardly do this, but just a little bit of offense to that. So I applaud the speaker for doing something as courageous as this and going back on her, going back on maybe, you know, something. And I see it. I see it. All I want is that we get this budget passed and that we can continue moving our government forward. I don't see this budget to be such egregious. It's actually a good budget, and I think it's workable all the way around. And I thank the speaker for her actions here today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Paris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of this reconsideration. I think what it shows is a level of maturity that we as leaders should emulate. I think it really shows that the proffer of this amendment or the reconsideration never lost sight of what our community needed, and is it to come to the aid of our educational system, our Department of Education. She never lost sight of that. When she first introduced this amendment, it was to really push the administration to pay attention to the urgent needs of Department of Education, because no one agency can do it alone. The legislature or Department of Education cannot do it together. We needed the administration support. And so when she first proffered this amendment, that happened. We saw traction happen. And the response from the administration was they did not like it, and they basically said they're going to pull their support to DOE if this amendment stays in there. And I think what this shows is the maturity of a leader that we need to make sure the Department of Education gets what it needs. And what we do here is so much bigger than ourselves. What we do here has true impacts. And I thank the author and for her maturity and never losing sight of what our community needs.
Thank you, Senator Pearce. I think there's no one else to speak. And there is an objection. Senator Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say mad respect to the original author here of the amendment, because, yeah, this is a very mature move. It was put in to encourage action, and once the action was seen and deemed to be unnecessary, I think it's appropriate that it be removed as well. I do take quite a bit of offense to the characterization that the amendments that this body has done is to fund pet projects. I can't think of anybody who would think that funding a cycle of firefighters and DOC guards is something we could consider a pet project. Just because people in this body would rather have jacuzzis in their office and watch their own personal TVs, and that's what the rest of us do. One of the things I really appreciate about this is, of the amendment being reconsidered by the author, is that everyone in this body sees they're one of the governor's biggest critics. So I think it's quite the step towards getting stuff done and actual solutions that it seems that from the outside looking in, the governor's office, the superintendent, and their biggest critics are in some sort of kumbaya that this is the solution and things are getting done. And mad respect that they could acknowledge that when they criticize her for things not getting done, they criticize her, but when things are moving, they acknowledge that. And to that, I'd like to commend the previous speakers. And to the people still resisting, are you just resisting for resisting's sake? What is going on? That you can't see this gesture where multiple people who are generally not disinclined to work together are finally working together. And we are saying we're shortchanging our children when our leaders are finally working together? No. That doesn't seem right. Sometimes I think it's not about the $20 million and the children. Because the way some people in this body treat it, they treat it like a political football. And that's not right. To those who would treat it like a political football, do better. With that, I yield the rest of my time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There's no one else to speak. There is an objection. Oh, ma'am, you want to close?
Yes,
please?
thank you. I want to thank my colleague. Oh, sorry.
Correction. Oh, Senator Shelter, Madam Vice, first.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say I rise in support of this amendment to reconsider, and I literally appreciate the efforts of the speaker and sharing with us what is happening to date with the Department of Education and the resources that are needed to get by. Sometimes when we need to get to a place, sometimes pressure needs to be adhered to or what have you. But in the ultimate end, when we're going to do right by what needs to be done, we literally need to come together. And I just want to say that I appreciate the good speaker for this reconsideration, and I support her efforts. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for the sound.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice. The air conditioning. Senator Shelton, just speak louder so that.
Thank you. I don't think it's the volume. I think there's just a lot of feedback today. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank the mover of this amendment or the reconsideration. I want to thank her for her willingness to work together to push the Department of Education, to push the administration, to have the courage to make this move in the spirit of collaboration and progress for the people of Guam. And I also want to commend our colleagues at the same time for being able to work together as leaders in our community, as people who are prioritizing the needs of the people of Guam. I want to thank our colleagues for thinking about the fishermen and the co-op and the food sustainability for our community, and thinking about the safety of our community with the DOC cycle, with the fire department cycle. I want to thank our colleagues for supporting a
a supplemental increase to the cost of living allowance for our retirees. All very good and important pet projects, priorities that we are setting for the people of Guam, to include education, the Department of Education, the charter schools, all the youth of the island. So I wanted just to take a minute to thank our mover of this amendment and to thank our body for the collaboration today.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, in closing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for the debate on this measure and for the ability to reconsider it. Just to add to the projects is, of course, the hospital. And I think that what we've tried to do throughout this budget is exert our checks and balance power, where they don't ask for money for the hospital, but we can see that everything's failing, and the CEO comes in here and says they don't have it. We try to give it, even though they refuse it, just like the GDOE and the 20 million. We tried to give it, we've tried to force it, we've tried to do everything to get it so that they couldn't fix the schools before the school year started. Some of us did not think that was the priority, that the schools get inspected before the school year started. But still, throughout the budget, I think we have done a very good job of doing what we're supposed to do, and that is continuing to make sure that GDOE gets everything it needs, the waived procurement, the funding. We continue to make sure in this budget that we've built in some very deep checks and balances on any further raid on GDOE funds, that we've continued the appropriation of the 20 million, which was offered and passed by one of my Republican colleagues. I completely supported that. And we continue to support that in here by continuing that appropriation, by adding the 10 million on top of that, by giving a different funding source for Typhoon Mawar expenditures that doesn't allow further tapping of GDOE and stops the blank check that we had given the governor in good faith. It also allows the current projects that the superintendent is very concerned about to continue. The procurement that is ongoing continues. Nothing gets interrupted, like they threatened us. They were going to interrupt the procurement. I was a hypocrite, everything. I don't care any about that. I want to make sure the students are in a safe place. So I want to thank my colleagues. If I can get your support on this, I think we've still done a very good job in building into this budget what we needed to do, and to find another way to ensure that GDOE is going to get those funds, that the pressure on fixing the schools does not get relieved, and that we've been able to also accomplish some other good things as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, the motion again is to reconsider the actions of the body on the amendment, and understood.
There is an objection.
Motion, is this a motion to remove then, or to? No, is this to reconsider? So a vote
of no.
We're voting on the amendment again. So I'm going to vote no, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And there was an objection to that. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. You objected
Mr. Chair,
to it.
Mr. Chair, is it all in favor to withdraw the amendment? Or is it?
No.
Yeah.
No, okay. It's reconsider the amendment. So by you objecting to reconsider it, right? You're voting yes to keep it. Everyone else, because you objected to it.
Mr. Chair, maybe can I amend my motion to, notwithstanding the rules, motion to withdraw this amendment?
Oh, motion to withdraw. And you objected to it, right? Okay. All in favor to withdraw the amendment, please raise your hand. Motion passes. My colleagues, we will now close Chapter 5, Chapter 12, and Chapter 13. Thank you. We're now, ma'am, we're now in chapter 14? The very last chapter. That one. The servability. If anybody wants to speak on servability,
That ends the chapter, right,
that
Mr.?
ends the chapter. So if anybody wants to speak on chapter 14, anyone? Nope, it ends it. So, chapter 14 is closed. Senator Tello, if you can.
Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Senator Sinati, Sr., recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that Bill 26-37 COR as substituted by the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and amended in the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to be placed on the third reading file.
Are there any objections? There is an objection. All those in favor of sending it to the third reading file, please raise your hand. Okay. It moves to the third reading file. On the recommendation,
I apologize.
yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to rise from the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation that Bill 26-37 CR as substituted by the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and amended in the Committee of the Whole be placed on third reading file. That should have been my motion first. I apologize.
Okay, and there was an is there still an there is an objection. All those in favor of moving it to the third reading file, please raise your hand.
Rising.
And to rise out of the Committee of the Whole.
Burnett. Just
to rise out of the Committee of the Whole.
To rise with the recommendation.
Let me reframe that. There has been a motion to rise out of the Committee of the Whole with a recommendation to place on the third reading file. There has been an objection. All those in favor of this, of rising out of the Committee of the Whole and sending it to third reading file, please raise your hand. The motion passes. Okay, we're going to stand in recess as we switch over.
We're back from recess. We're now back at second reading. Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to report back to the body after deliberation on Bill number 26-37 COR as substituted by the Committee on General Government Operations and Appropriations and amended in the Committee of the Whole with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to place on the third reading file.
On that motion to place the bill 26-37 COR on the third reading, is there any objection? There's an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries. Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move to recess until 5 p.m. today to vote on this budget bill.
Objection. I'd like to debate the time. I understand that a motion to recess is a
You can make an
privileged,
amendment on the
non-debatable-
time. You can make a motion to amend the time. Is there,
Tomorrow morning at 9.
there's a motion to amend the time to tomorrow morning at 9.
Objection.
There's an objection. All in favor of recessing until 9 tomorrow, raise your hand. Motion fails. We're back on the motion, notwithstanding the rules, to recess until 5 p.m. and vote on Bill 26-37 COR. On that motion, please, all in favor? There's been an objection. Or is there an objection? There's an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries. We'll be recessed until 5 p.m. and we're going to go into the third reading and vote on 26-37 COR.